Sidi Haneish Airfield, Egypt, July 27, 1942, just after midnight. The guards lean on their rifles and watch a line of German transport planes gleam under a low desert moon. Junkers, Stukas, Messerschmitts, row after row after row. Someone laughs. The British are finished, they say. Beaten back toward Alamein. Beaten out of the sky. This airfield is the safest posting in North Africa. Then the desert itself starts moving. 18 small shapes detach from the darkness. Low, fast, no headlights. Nothing but engines and sand. For half a second, the guards think it's a mirage. Then the guns open up. 4 machine guns per vehicle. Thousands of rounds a minute tearing into parked aircraft at point-blank range. Fuel tanks bloom into orange fire. Metal screams. Men who were laughing 30 seconds ago are now running for their lives. 5 minutes later, it's over. The convoy melts back into the dark before a single enemy fighter can get airborne. 37 aircraft. Destroyed by a vehicle so small, so cheap, so ridiculous-looking that 2 years earlier, American generals had laughed at the very idea of it. They called it a toy, a go-kart, a joke on 4 wheels that no serious army would trust with a battlefield. They were almost right. This machine was almost strangled at birth by the very people who'd come to depend on it more than any tank they owned. This is the story of how something nobody wanted did the work of an army. Rewind to the summer of 1940. France has just fallen. Dunkirk is a memory of burning trucks and men wading into the sea. Britain stands alone, watching the Channel. Across the Atlantic, American planners are watching too. And what they see is terrifying. Their army is still built for the last war. Horses, motorcycles with sidecars, boxy scout cars on road tires that get stuck the moment they leave pavement. Reconnaissance units the eyes of an army are riding equipment that was outdated before most of their soldiers were born. Think about what that means. A scout's whole job is speed. See the enemy first, then get back before anyone dies. But his motorcycle can't cross a plowed field. His sidecar tips on rocky ground. Modern war doesn't wait for roads anymore. Germany has just proven that. Blitzkrieg isn't only about tanks, it's about crossing terrain nobody else can touch. If America fights this new kind of war with old equipment, its scouts are already dead. They just don't know it yet. So in July 1940, the Army Quartermaster Corps writes a set of specifications that reads less like a purchase order and more like a dare, a light, 4-wheel drive reconnaissance vehicle, able to carry 3 men and their gear across terrain that would swallow a truck. Then they mail it to 135 manufacturers, with 11 days to bid, 49 days to deliver a running prototype, and 75 days to hand over dozens of test vehicles. It isn't a deadline. It's an insult dressed up as an opportunity. Ford quietly declines. General Motors doesn't bother responding. Out of 135 companies, exactly 2 say yes. One of them is a nearly bankrupt car company most Americans have never heard of. American Bantam Car Company. Butler, Pennsylvania. A workforce that fits on 1 factory floor. A balance sheet circling 0. Bantam builds small, underpowered civilian cars that nobody wants to buy. This Army contract isn't a business opportunity, it's the last lifeline the company has left. One problem. Bantam has no engineer capable of designing a brand new 4-wheel drive vehicle from scratch in a matter of days. So they call a man named Karl Probst. Probst is a freelance automotive engineer, 56 years old. Not a rising star, not a Pentagon favorite, just a working engineer with decades of unglamorous experience. When Bantam's executives explain the deadline, most professionals would laugh and hang up. Karl Probst says yes. He shows up with no salary guarantee, agreeing to work on a promise of future payment. His total compensation, in the end, comes to $200 for helping redefine modern warfare. He starts on a Wednesday. By Friday, 2 days later, he has hand-drawn the entire design, every dimension tuned to hit a weight limit that engineers at far bigger companies had already called impossible. Then comes the hard part, actually building it. Bantam's tiny crew works around the clock with no prototype shop and no room for error. Just one shot, one deadline, and a design that exists only on paper. On September 23, 1940, squeaking in right at the wire, Bantam wheels a finished running vehicle into Camp Holabird, Maryland, for the Army to test. 49 days. Exactly 49. The other company that said yes, Willys Overland, isn't even close to ready. Every true giant of the American auto industry missed the window completely. A company that almost didn't exist has just done what Ford and General Motors said couldn't be done. The Army officers circle the little machine sitting in the test yard. Some are impressed. Others start to laugh. Look at it. Really look at it. No doors. No roof. Beyond a canvas flap that does nothing in the rain. No armor. The body panels are thinner than a modern car's fender trim. A tiny engine, barely stronger than a lawn tractor. It sits so low you could practically step over it. It looks like something a child would pedal around a driveway. Not a machine meant to carry 3 armed men into combat. Officers used to thundering tanks and half-tracks struggle to keep a straight face. Some call it a beach buggy. Others compare it, less kindly, to a bathtub bolted to a lawnmower engine. There's a running joke that this toy won't survive 6 weeks before it shakes itself apart. And on paper, the doubt almost makes sense. Empty. It weighs about a ton. Load it with 3 soldiers. A machine gun, ammunition, rations, and fuel. And by ordinary logic it should collapse under its own cargo. Except it doesn't. Because Karl Probst didn't just draw a small car. He engineered a bridge between 2 ideas that had never comfortably lived together, something light enough to be cheap and disposable, and something tough enough to survive a war. 4-wheel drive sends power to every tire at once, so it claws over mud, sand, and broken rock that would leave a normal car spinning helplessly. The suspension is stiff and simple, built to absorb punishment, not offer comfort. Nothing on this vehicle exists for decoration. Nothing exists that isn't needed. It can climb a slope steep enough to burn a man's legs just walking it. It can ford a stream deep enough to drown a sedan's engine. Strip a few parts off, and 4 soldiers can physically lift it out of a ditch by hand. Willys Overland and Ford eventually get a look at Bantam's design. The Army needs far more vehicles than the tiny company can ever build. Willys refines the engine into something with real punch. The final production version becomes the Willys MB, the vehicle the world will simply call the Jeep. But the bones, the idea, the ridiculous little concept that a war could be fought from something this small, that traces back to a company on the edge of bankruptcy, and a freelance engineer nobody in the Pentagon had ever heard of. The laughing in that test yard doesn't stop right away. It's about to stop for good. Fast forward to North Africa, 1942. The Jeep isn't just a scout car anymore. A small band of renegades has just turned it into a weapon. Their unit is the Special Air Service. Their founder, David Stirling, was considered so unconventional that his own superiors initially dismissed him as a nuisance who'd get his men killed chasing fantasies of desert raiding. Stirling's idea is simple, almost insane. Strip the toy of anything that isn't a weapon. Bolt on rapid-fire aircraft machine guns, and drive it straight into the heart of enemy territory. Not to scout, to attack. Each SAS Jeep can now unleash thousands of rounds a minute. A handful of them hitting an airfield in the dark can generate more sustained gunfire than an entire infantry company. And that's exactly what breaks the enemy. German and Italian ground crews are trained to defend against bombers overhead, against tank columns on the horizon. Nobody trains you to defend against a swarm of jeeps materializing silently out of open desert at midnight, guns already blazing, gone before your own weapons are even readied. No siren for this. No warning shot. Just engines in the dark. And then, the world turning to fire. Survivors of these raids consistently overestimate how many attackers hit them. 18 jeeps and 60 men get remembered, retold, and reported up the chain as an assault by a much larger force. The muzzle flashes. The sheer volume of fire from vehicles nobody expected to see armed at all It convinces frightened men in the dark that they're facing a battalion, not a raiding party the size of a rugby squad. Rumors move through Rommel's Afrika Korps faster than intelligence reports. Stories of a phantom desert force that strikes anywhere, anytime, and vanishes before dawn. Rear area airfield duty, once the safest posting in the whole theater, starts to feel like the most dangerous. That fear matters almost as much as the burning aircraft. An army afraid of its own shadow starts pulling men away from the front line to guard depots that never needed guarding before. Starts flinching at engine noise that turns out to be nothing at all. The Jeep was never designed as a weapon. It was designed to carry one scout and his rifle across broken ground. In the hands of men willing to break every rule, this toy became something the enemy couldn't predict, couldn't plan for, and increasingly couldn't stop thinking about. Here's the part of the story most people never hear, because it almost didn't happen this way at all. Before the Jeeps. Before Sidi Haneish. The SAS's very first mission, in November 1941, followed the proper, traditional method senior command insisted on: parachute in at night, walk to the target on foot, plant explosives by hand, walk out to a rendezvous. No Jeeps. No vehicles at all. Just men, boots, and open desert. A sandstorm hits mid-drop. Winds strong enough to fling trained men miles off course, scattering them across pitch-black terrain with no way to signal each other. Weapon containers vanish into the night, lost along with the men who needed them. Of roughly 60 men who jumped that night, around 22 are killed or captured. Nearly a third of the unit, gone, on the very first mission, because command trusted an old-fashioned method over anything that looked unconventional. The Special Air Service comes within a hair of being disbanded on the spot. Faith in the way things have always been done nearly kills the entire idea before it gets a second chance. It takes officers like Stirling and Paddy Mayne fighting to try something different, trusting a small, ridiculous vehicle most senior officers still considered a glorified errand runner. Compare that to Sidi Haneish, 8 months later. 18 Jeeps, roughly 60 men. 37 enemy aircraft destroyed in minutes. 2 men lost. Same size force. Same desert. Same enemy. The difference wasn't courage. The men of that first sandstorm jump were every bit as brave as the men who raced across Sidi Haneish. The difference was 4 wheels, an engine, and someone finally willing to trust the machine everyone else had laughed at. Rigid thinking cost 22 men their freedom or their lives in a storm nobody could see. A cheap, mocked little vehicle brought 60 men home from a raid that destroyed more aircraft than most bombing missions managed in a night. By the time the guns fell silent in 1945, more than 600,000 of these vehicles had rolled off American production lines. They crossed the beaches of Normandy. They climbed jungle trails in the Pacific. They towed artillery, hauled wounded men to safety, carried generals to the front, and ran messages under fire when radios failed. Dwight Eisenhower, reflecting after the war on what actually won it, didn't point only to tanks or bombers. He pointed to a short list of unglamorous tools that quietly carried the whole effort on their backs, and this toy was always near the top of that list. Karl Probst never became a household name. He drew the most influential vehicle blueprint of the 20th century in 2 unpaid days, collected $200 for it, and went back to obscurity. Most soldiers who climbed into his creation never knew his name at all. But go back to that airfield at Sidi Haneish. Picture those guards again, leaning on their rifles under the desert moon, laughing at the idea that British forces were finished. They had 30 seconds of laughter left. 30 seconds before the same machine that American generals once mocked as a joke on 4 wheels came roaring out of the dark to do, in one night, the work of an army.